There are moments in life when the lights go out, not around you, but inside you. You're still smiling, you're still showing up, you're still saying, I'm good. But deep down, you're tired, confused, wounded. This is not the season you prayed for. This is not how you imagined it would turn out. And you're asking one simple, desperate prayer. God, please don't leave me here. Darkness does not mean God has left. Many people mistake silence for absence and pain for abandonment, but silence is often where God does his deepest work. When everything is loud and clear, faith is easy. When prayers are answered quickly and doors open without resistance, trust feels natural. But when the lights go out and clarity disappears, the heart begins to question what the mind once believed. This is where misunderstanding begins. Darkness feels like distance, but distance is not always real. A child may close their eyes and believe their parent has disappeared, yet the parent is still standing right there. In the same way, darkness can blind perception without changing reality. There are seasons when God does not explain himself, not because he is cruel, but because explanation would weaken trust. If every step was illuminated, faith would no longer be faith. Darkness forces dependence. It removes the illusion of control and strips away self-reliance. In the dark, people discover what they truly believe, not what they say they believe. Comfort allows performance. Darkness demands honesty. God does not leave in these moments. He watches closely, not as a distant observer, but as a present guide, allowing growth through uncertainty. Many assume that God's presence should always feel peaceful, but presence does not always come with comfort. Sometimes it comes with conviction, stretching, and exposure. A surgeon is closest when the pain is greatest, not because harm is intended, but because healing requires pressure. God's nearness in dark seasons often feels uncomfortable because it confronts wounds that light never revealed. He stays not to soothe immediately, but to strengthen deeply. Darkness becomes a classroom where patience is learned, humility is formed, and endurance is built. Scripture repeatedly shows that God works in hidden places. Seeds grow underground before they ever break the surface. Stars are only visible at night. Transformation often begins where visibility ends. If God abandoned every dark place, nothing would ever grow. The fear that God has left usually comes from expecting him to act the same way in every season. But maturity learns that presence changes form without changing reality. God may stop speaking loudly and start whispering. He may stop moving quickly and start working slowly. None of that signals departure. Human emotions are unreliable indicators of divine presence. Feelings fluctuate with exhaustion, disappointment, and loss. God does not. When pain increases, sensitivity decreases, making his nearness harder to feel but not less real. Darkness dulls spiritual senses, not spiritual truth. Trusting God in the dark is not pretending the pain is small. It is believing his character is bigger. God stays even when prayers feel unanswered, even when worship feels empty, even when faith feels fragile. His faithfulness does not depend on human awareness. Darkness also removes distractions that light allows. When everything is bright, people focus on blessings. In darkness, attention shifts to relationship. God stays because he desires closeness, not performance. He allows dark seasons to teach reliance, not punishment. The belief that darkness equals abandonment reveals a shallow understanding of faith shaped by comfort. Deep faith understands that God's presence is not proven by circumstances, but trusted through them. In the dark, God is often closer than ever, not fixing everything immediately, but holding everything together while growth takes place. Unseen faith still lives in honest prayers, especially the ones that feel unfinished, broken, or unpolished. Real faith does not always sound confident or composed. Sometimes it trembles. Sometimes it questions. Sometimes it barely finds the strength to speak at all. Honest prayer is not a performance meant to impress God. It is a cry that reveals dependence. When people believe they must sound strong to be faithful, they often stop praying altogether. But silence born from fear is not strength. Honest prayer keeps faith alive even when certainty is gone. There are prayers filled with gratitude and bold declarations, and there are prayers filled with confusion and grief. Both come from faith. The prayer that says, I trust you, and the prayer that says, I don't understand you, can exist in the same heart. God is not intimidated by doubt expressed in prayer. He is more concerned with distance than with questions. Faith does not die because someone struggles. It weakens when someone stops talking to God altogether. Honest prayer is evidence that the relationship still matters. Many people confuse faith with emotional stability. They believe strong faith always feels hopeful and peaceful. But faith is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to speak to God despite fear. Honest prayers often sound messy because pain does not organize itself neatly. Tears interrupt sentences. Anger spills into words meant for hope. Silence fills spaces where answers were expected. None of this disqualifies prayer. In fact, it makes it real. God listens more closely to sincerity than structure. Throughout spiritual history, the most powerful prayers were not always confident declarations, but desperate cries. Requests for help, questions of why, pleas for mercy. Faith lives in the act of turning toward God instead of away from Him. Even when the heart feels conflicted, prayer keeps the connection intact. Honest prayer admits weakness without surrendering belief. It says, I don't have the strength, but I know where to go. Some people stop praying because they believe their emotions displease God. They think frustration signals failure. But honesty is not rebellion. It is trust expressed without filters. A child who cries openly in a parent's arms does not lack trust. They demonstrate it. Honest prayer reveals reliance. It says God is safe enough to hear the truth. Pretending in prayer builds distance, but honesty invites closeness. Faith in honest prayer does not demand immediate answers. It rests in the act of speaking itself. Even when responses feel delayed or absent, prayer keeps hope breathing. It keeps the heart aligned even when the mind is confused. Honest prayer allows healing to begin before solutions appear. It clears space for God to work beneath the surface where words cannot reach. When faith feels weak, honest prayer becomes a lifeline. It holds the soul steady in uncertainty. It acknowledges pain without surrendering relationship. Faith does not require perfect words, just a willing heart. As long as prayer continues, faith continues. Even if it whispers, even if it questions, even if it cries out in the dark, God values presence over answers. Human nature longs for explanations, timelines, and clarity. When life becomes uncertain, the first instinct is to ask why, how long, and what comes next. Answers feel like control, and control feels like peace. But God often withholds explanations not to frustrate, but to deepen relationship. Answers can inform the mind, but presence transforms the heart. Knowing every reason behind pain would not heal the wound as deeply as knowing God is near within it. There are seasons when God could explain everything, but chooses not to. If answers alone produce trust, faith would be unnecessary. Presence teaches reliance in a way explanations never can. A person may understand why a storm is happening and still feel alone in it. But when someone stands beside them in the storm, the experience changes entirely. God's presence does not remove uncertainty, but it removes isolation. It assures the soul that it is not facing hardship alone. Many people chase answers because they believe understanding will bring peace, yet peace often arrives before understanding through presence. God sits with the brokenhearted, not always speaking, but staying. Silence from God is often misunderstood as neglect when it is actually intimacy. There are moments when words would distract from what God is doing internally. Presence allows God to work beneath the surface, reshaping trust, patience, and surrender without explanation. When people demand answers, they sometimes miss the comfort of presence. They listen for explanations instead of sensing companionship. God's nearness does not depend on circumstances improving. He does not wait for clarity to arrive before drawing close. In moments of grief, loss, and confusion, presence becomes the language God uses. It reassures without explaining. It steadies without solving. It holds without fixing. Human relationships reflect this truth. When someone is hurting deeply, Explanations often feel hollow. What they remember is who stayed, who listened, who did not rush them through pain. God understands this better than anyone. He values staying with his people more than satisfying their curiosity. Presence communicates care more powerfully than answers ever could. God's presence also teaches trust in ways logic cannot. Answers can create dependency on information. Presence creates dependency on relationship. When God becomes the source of comfort rather than explanations, faith matures. It moves from transactional to relational. Faith stops asking what God will do and starts resting in who God is. There are moments when answers would actually limit growth. If everything made sense, surrender would be unnecessary. Trust would become conditional. God values hearts that stay close even when understanding is incomplete. Presence invites humility, reminding humanity that not everything is meant to be understood immediately. Some things are meant to be endured with God rather than solved without him. When answers are delayed, presence remains constant. God does not withdraw because questions exist. He draws closer. He meets uncertainty with nearness. He replaces the need to know with the assurance of being known. His presence becomes the anchor when logic fails, the comfort when clarity disappears, the steady reality that does not change with circumstances. Dark seasons refine, not destroy. Refinement is a process that removes what is unnecessary so what is valuable can remain. Destruction eliminates purpose, but refinement reveals it. Many people confuse the pain of refinement with the intention of destruction because both feel intense. Yet refinement always has an outcome in mind. It works slowly, deliberately, and precisely. Dark seasons are not random punishments. They are intentional periods where growth occurs beneath the surface. Pressure often exposes what comfort conceals. In seasons of ease, weaknesses can remain hidden and character can go untested. Darkness applies pressure that reveals truth. It shows where trust is shallow and where it is strong. It identifies attachments that have replaced dependence on God. This exposure can feel unsettling, but it is necessary for transformation. Refinement is uncomfortable because it confronts areas that must change for growth to continue. Fire is often associated with danger, yet it is also the tool used to purify valuable materials. Gold is refined by heat, not because it lacks worth, but because it possesses it. Dark seasons function the same way. They do not come because someone is disposable, but because they are valuable enough to be shaped. The intensity of the process reflects the value of the result. What survives refinement emerges stronger, purer, and more resilient. Dark seasons also strip away false identities. When success, recognition, or stability are removed, people are forced to confront who they are without those supports. This can feel like loss, but it is actually clarity. Refinement removes what is temporary so what is eternal can take root. It shifts identity from performance to purpose, from achievement to character. The darkness removes distractions that once defined worth and replaces them with deeper foundations. Growth in darkness is often invisible. Just because progress cannot be seen does not mean it is not happening. Seeds grow underground long before they emerge. Roots deepen in hidden places, not in the open air. Dark seasons strengthen foundations that will later support visible fruit. What feels stagnant on the surface may be active beneath it. Refinement often works silently, reshaping attitudes, perspectives, and desires without immediate evidence. Refinement also teaches endurance. It builds the ability to remain steady under pressure without breaking. Destruction weakens, but refinement strengthens. Each challenge faced in darkness develops resilience that cannot be gained in ease. This resilience becomes a resource in future seasons, providing stability when new challenges arise. The strength gained in darkness often becomes the very thing that allows someone to support others later. Dark seasons redefine success. Instead of measuring life by outcomes, refinement measures it by faithfulness. Progress becomes less about achievement and more about integrity. Refinement slows the pace so lessons can be learned deeply rather than quickly. It removes the rush and replaces it with intentional growth. The belief that dark seasons are meant to destroy creates fear and resistance. Understanding refinement changes perspective. It allows patience to replace panic and trust to replace despair. Darkness becomes a place of preparation rather than defeat. What enters the dark season unrefined emerges with greater clarity, strength, and purpose shaped through pressure and persistence. Weakness invites divine strength. Human nature resists weakness because it feels like exposure and vulnerability. From an early age, people are taught to hide what is broken and highlight what is impressive. Strength is praised while weakness is avoided. Yet weakness is often the doorway through which true strength enters. When human ability reaches its limit, space is created for something greater to take over. Weakness does not disqualify a person, it positions them for transformation. Weakness strips away illusions of self-sufficiency. As long as someone believes they can manage everything on their own, reliance remains shallow. Strength built on independence often collapses under pressure. Weakness forces honesty. It removes the mask of control and reveals the need for help. This need is not a failure, but an invitation. It signals that human limits have been reached, making room for divine involvement. Divine strength does not compete with human strength. It complements human surrender. When people cling to their own power, they often block the work that could sustain them. Weakness opens the heart to receive rather than perform. It shifts focus from proving worth to accepting grace. This shift is uncomfortable because it challenges pride, but it is necessary for growth. True strength begins where self-reliance ends. Many people fear weakness because they associate it with loss of respect or identity. But weakness does not erase value, it reveals humanity. It creates connection rather than isolation. Those who admit weakness often experience deeper support and understanding. In spiritual terms, weakness creates alignment. It allows divine strength to operate without resistance. Instead of striving, the soul learns to rest in provision beyond itself. Weakness also sharpens awareness. It heightens sensitivity to guidance, correction, and care. When someone is strong in their own ability, they may ignore subtle direction. Weakness slows the pace and opens the ears. It creates attentiveness that strength alone cannot produce. This attentiveness allows divine strength to flow with precision rather than force. Divine strength often manifests quietly. It does not always arrive as a dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes it appears as endurance, patience, or peace in the middle of difficulty. Weakness allows these forms of strength to be recognized and received. What once felt like collapse becomes support. What felt like emptiness becomes capacity. Weakness expands the ability to carry weight without breaking. In weakness, expectations change. Success is no longer measured by dominance or control, but by faithfulness and perseverance. Weakness redefines victory as continuing despite difficulty. This redefinition protects the heart from burnout and disappointment. It teaches sustainability instead of exhaustion. Divine strength sustains rather than impresses. Weakness also produces humility, which protects strength from corruption. Power without humility becomes destructive. Weakness keeps strength grounded and purposeful. It ensures that strength serves rather than dominates. Through weakness, strength remains compassionate and patient. When weakness is embraced rather than resisted, it becomes a source of renewal. It invites strength that does not depend on circumstance. It creates stability that does not collapse under pressure. Weakness becomes the place where divine strength settles, not temporarily, but as a sustaining presence that carries the soul forward through every challenge. This season is temporary, not final. Pain has a way of convincing the mind that the present moment will last forever. When days repeat with the same weight and nights offer no relief, time feels suspended. The future becomes difficult to imagine and hope feels distant, but seasons by nature change. No season remains permanently, no matter how intense it feels while it is happening. What feels endless is often just unresolved, not eternal. Temporary seasons often feel final because they affect identity. When struggle lasts longer than expected, people begin to define themselves by it. Pain becomes familiar, and familiarity creates fear of change. Yet duration does not determine destiny. A long season can still be a passing one. The length of difficulty does not cancel the promise of movement. Time spent in one place does not mean life will end there. Seasons have purposes. They come to teach, shape, and prepare, not to imprison. Winter may appear lifeless, but it protects the ground for what will grow later. The absence of visible progress does not mean nothing is happening. Temporary seasons work quietly, rearranging priorities and strengthening foundations. They prepare the heart for what it could not carry before. What feels like delay is often preparation. Finality implies closure without continuation, but life rarely moves that way. Growth is ongoing even when it feels paused. Temporary seasons may close chapters, but they also open new ones. Endings are not always losses. Sometimes they are transitions. The inability to see what comes next does not mean nothing is coming. Vision is often limited during transition, not because direction is gone, but because perspective is changing. Temporary seasons also test patience. They slow the pace so lessons can take root. When life moves too quickly, growth becomes shallow. Difficulty forces reflection, evaluation, and adjustment. These processes are uncomfortable, but they prevent repetition of past mistakes. Temporary seasons act as interruptions that redirect paths before permanent damage occurs. Believing a season is final creates despair. Believing it is temporary creates endurance. Endurance does not eliminate pain, but it changes how pain is carried. It allows strength to build gradually rather than collapse suddenly. Temporary seasons teach how to hold on without rushing outcomes. They build resilience that remains long after the season ends. Final seasons bring endings without renewal. Temporary seasons carry the promise of change. Even if the timing is unknown, hope survives not because answers are clear, but because movement is certain. Life continues to unfold beyond present circumstances. What is happening now is part of a larger story, not the conclusion of it. Temporary seasons also create contrast. Without difficulty, growth would go unnoticed. Relief feels meaningful because struggle existed first. Joy becomes deeper because pain was once present. Temporary hardship sharpens appreciation for future peace. It expands emotional capacity rather than diminishing it. This season may feel heavy, confusing, and exhausting, but it is not the last chapter. It is a passage, not a destination. It will shift, change, and eventually give way to something new, carrying forward the strength, insight, and depth developed within it